Something like that.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for being here for our Milwaukee Poetry Series, reading tonight and being here in person. So we are in person. Yeah, I agree. I'm Tom Hogan, the coordinator of the Milwaukee Poetry Series, and in addition to you being here for Charles's reading, we're also live streaming this on the Letting Library YouTube channel. So if you want to watch it afterwards, that's going to be available, and it should be up and available in about a week after there's some editing, if people want to watch it on demand. So thank you. We know that you have a lot of other things that you could be doing tonight, and so it's we're absolutely delighted that you are here. I've been thinking, the calendar says it's fall, but the weather seems like it's saying it's the end of summer. Anyway, we've been having very nice weather, and it looks like that there's going to be more of that coming. Before I introduce Charles, I want to make some thanks. So thanks to the Letting Library. We're here in the beautiful community room, and our tech person tonight is Robert Langston, who is from the library staff. So thank you, Robert, for being here and for doing that. Thank you to the city of Milwaukee that has been supportive of the Milwaukee Poetry Series from the beginning. We're in our 16th season. We're absolutely delighted about that. Thanks to the Poetry Committee. We have an active Poetry Committee here. So one of our members, Bev Spurgeon, is right here and helping with that. And thanks to my lovely wife, Jane, who is right here, who is going to be selling books, Charles's books later. So if you want to get one of Charles's books, they're back there. And she's going to be doing that. I want to remind you about your telephonic devices. So if you could silence your pagers and beepers and other electronic devices. We have a broadside of one of Charles's poems. If you haven't got a broadside, I think Bev will pass them out.
I have it.
You have, okay. We also have a sign-up sheet if you're not on our list to get our material. So the sign-up list is right over here, plus a flyer of the Milwaukee Poetry Series poets. Our next poet is going to be Teal Ansari. She's going to be here on the second Wednesday of November. So we've been delighted to have Charles here. A part of me wants to say welcome back, and I really can say welcome back. Charles read here before, back in the 4th season, March 9th, 2011. I unfortunately wasn't able to be here in person for that reading, so I've had to watch it on the archives, but the readings are archived. They've been just moving over. We have a new website. I don't know if you've seen that. We have a new website, so the readings are archived on our Milwaukee Poetry Series website. Charles is here March 9th, 2011. We're absolutely delighted that he's back again. He's got a new book of poems, Watering the Rhubarb, and it's just out from Flowstone Press. Previous books include the poetry collections, A Scripture of Crows, Going to Seed, Dispatches from the Garden, and Insects of South Corvallis, along with a collection of essays, The Practice of Home, and 2 co-edited anthologies, Forest Under Story, Creative Inquiry in an Old Growth Forest, and In the Blast Zone, Catastrophe and Renewal on Mount St. Helens. Following a long career as a professional gardener and a decade working with the Spring Creek Project for Ideas, Nature and the Written Word at Oregon State University, Charles writes and gardens near the confluence of the Marys and Willamette Rivers in the traditional homeland of the Ampunifu Band of the Kelapua in Corvallis, Oregon. Would you join me in delighting and welcoming our poet tonight, Charles Goodrich? Charles.
not to cross the chords, and I respect that advice. That's really good advice. Thank you, Tom. That was a lovely introduction. Thank you all for being here. How are you doing? For whom is this the first in-person event that you've been to since COVID times? A couple people, Robert, and you're getting paid, so that's good. That's good. Are you getting paid? No. Most people have been starting to get back. It's still a little weird though, isn't it? And I totally have lost my social muscles, so I get anxious. So treat me kindly. And it's strange times all around. Democracy is hanging from a thread. Climate change is escalating, and we're all being impacted by it. So fraught times. I hope that a little bit of poetry will help assuage all of our wounds. I'm going to address two themes in my poem tonight. One is, despite the challenges and fears we all have, I think it's a moral responsibility to pay attention to the beauty of the world. And as far as we're able to permit ourselves to feel joy when we do, many people can't or have many fewer opportunities. So yes, we're worried, yes, we're fearful, but if joy comes, we should let it in, and especially attend to the beauty of the world, because the world is no less miraculous because of what we're doing for it. In fact, I take this advice from one of my friends and mentors, Robin Wall Kimmerer. I hope you know her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, a magnificent book. Robin writes in Braiding Sweetgrass, even a wounded world is feeding us. Even a wounded world holds us, giving us moments of wonder and joy. I choose joy, she writes, over despair, not because I have my head in the sand, but because joy is what the earth gives me daily, and I must return the gift. If we feel joy, we have an obligation to return the gift to the world. What a remarkable way to face the day. And the other theme I'm going to address, reading mostly from my new book, Watering the Rhubarb. You know, rhubarb is a tart and tasty perennial garden vegetable, mostly good for pie and sauce. You may or may not know that it's also a slang for a quarrel or a squabble, especially a heated dispute on the playing field. When the baseball teams empty the dugouts and come out slugging, that's a rhubarb. And so I got a quarrel to pick with the way things are going in the world. So this book has a lot of quarrelsome pieces in it, and I'll share some with you. I'm going to do it two basic batches. I'm going to read first a bunch of poems from Watering the Rhubarb, and then I'm going to do a second set of work poems. I lived in this part of Portland in the 70s, and I started my first gardening job was here. And I'm going to read you a little sequence of my history as a professional gardener. But I'm going to start with quarrelsome poems. This is the poem from which the title is taken. Sometimes if you're going to engage with politics, you need a tall, stiff drink. That's the title of this first poem, A Tall, Stiff Drink. Some of our friends say our well water tastes like nails. Sharp with magnesium and iron, it tarnishes our sink and stains our clothes. But on a sorry summer afternoon, when the so-called president is demonizing immigrants, women, formerly loyal aides, I'd like to fill a tall glass with tap water, hard and cold from deep in the earth, and guzzle it all in one long tilt before heading back out to the garden to water the rhubarb. Here's a work poem. It's called Unclogging a Drain During the Impeachment Trial. Toilet's plugged and the bathroom sink drain is sluggish. I was in the dumps already over national politics. Abuse of power, obstruction of justice. I'm guessing the septic tank is overdue for pumping. And meanwhile, we still haven't seen his taxes. Even though I'm glum and angry, I can still do minor plumbing. I run the drain snake, work the plunger, get the commode running. Next, with an arm's length of wire with a little hook bent into the end, I fish a wet gray gob of hair gunk from the sink's P-trap, then pour baking soda, salt, and vinegar down the drain, and wait for the chemical reaction to begin. Even if the Senate trial turns out to be a sham, I love the sound when the blockage dissolves and the sink drain hisses and foams. Can you hear that hissing and foaming even now? Even now, let's hope we get the blockage dissolved. Did you feel the earthquake last week? Anybody feel the earthquake? Yes, yes. Joan felt it. It was, epicenter was a little bit closer to where we are in Corvallis, and 5:50 in the morning, I heard a little, and I thought my wife was kicking me as she does sometimes, but I woke up and looked at the clock, and my lamp was on the bedside table was going like that. That was making the sound. And I go, that might have been an earthquake. And then I was excited to see in the news that indeed it was. I really like to be near disasters once I'm safe and nothing bad has happened to me, but to observe them. So this is called seismic activity on Mary's Peak. Mary's Peak, as you probably know, is the tallest peak in the Coast Range due west of Corvallis, so that dominates our horizon. And Cup and I spend a lot of time up there. Seismic activity on Mary's Peak. Scientists determined the earthquake was centered 100 miles off the coast, 4.2 on the Richter scale, too slight to be felt on land. But I was sitting in the meadow on top of Mary's Peak that day, watching several species of wasps, flies, and bees patronizing a lily, like hard-drinking aliens at an intergalactic tavern. And I felt something. Whether it was that distant submarine trembler or a sudden disappearance of self, or just the mountain shrugging its shoulders in stoic indifference, I couldn't say. So Tom reminded us that it is autumn. Since we can't look at the sky and tell that quite yet, it still feels summer-like, but it is autumn and the rains are coming. I hope that we're due. And how do you feel about the coming of the rains? You're looking forward? Yeah, see, now there's always somebody just, I don't make the rain. Yeah, right. Most people feel kind of strongly, and if I asked you in February, the answer would be different. So this is a poem about this particular season and the challenges, potential challenges. It's called Winter Riches. Early autumn rains blustered in this week, and some of our friends are already grumbling. The oncoming darkness looms before them like a sentence. They're getting pre-depressed. It's true that Cascadia is famous for long, dreary winters, but the odd person flourishes. As quick as the rivers rise, steel headers pour out before dawn to cast their lines onto fish-haunted waters. Mushroomers, armed with baskets and small knives, get all bug-eyed, scanning the duff under the fir trees for king boletus and golden chanterelles. And someone with a taste for gray solitude, for the drab music of guttering rain, and a penchant for gathering words and phrases onto a blank page, may feel flush. Winter works for me. I just go inside and huddle down. So I started out by reminding us all, myself especially, to pay attention to the beauty of the world, but way too often, I just don't feel like I'm up to it. I just feel like I am not present to the miraculousness of the world. Try as I might. Our society is set up to be constantly distracting from me, that importance of being present to the world. So this is a poem that tries to wrestle with that. It's called Miracle Fatigue. When the blossoms of the winter camellia, glowing white as bone china cups through the late February afternoon gloom, don't give rise to even a glimmer of delight, I figure I'm just tired of getting my spirit teased by every trivial outburst of beauty. But later, when I notice drops of dew suspended from the fence wire, each bead reflecting another whole world, like a necklace of disembodied God's eyes, and I don't shudder or gasp, I realize I'm suffering revelation overload. Yeah, I know. Any moment's run-of-the-mill exquisiteness will never come again. But I just can't seem to absorb any more amazement. I'm sick of epiphanies, weary of wonders. Dear world, grant me a few more weeks of restorative boredom. Your glories will not be diminished by the absence of my attention. Come spring, with luck, I'll be porous again. The poem has a neologism for the title. Have you heard the word solastalgia? Solastalgia. It was coined by a psychologist to help us understand new kinds of grief we face with climate change and other changes in our surroundings. It's the same root as nostalgia. So algia is pain. Nostalgia is home, pain for home. Solastalgia is kind of pain for time, to sense the time that the world is slipping away from us. And I definitely feel that. So when I saw that word, I thought, well, that one would maybe be one to include in our lexicon, trying to understand our reactions to what's going on around us. It's kind of pre-grief. So this is called solastalgia. Only a few big wildfires in Oregon this summer, though Africa and the Amazon are ablaze. How much time remains in the gasoline crack of history is hard to say. Regardless, it's a peaceful late summer day on Mary's Peak. Silvery blue butterflies zigzag among bedraggled lupins, following chemical scents to nectar. Their haphazard paths bring to mind impermanence. Even in peaceable times, nothing lasts. And now, as the planet begins to overheat, flowers, butterflies, and humans are all going down. The butterflies have flown. I kneel in the meadow and comb through the grass, looking for an ant or a beetle, any animate miracle, any unwitting fellow traveler. Thus far, I've always been able to find somebody. How strange to be joyful in this moment while afraid and homesick at the same time. Already nostalgic for things that aren't quite yet gone. It's a poem for birds. I had a yellow rump warbler strike our dining room window one day, and as happens way too often, and thump and hard and fall to the ground, I went out to see if I could help revive it or at least protect it from the cats. And it had hit too hard and it expired in my hands. And I actually said in my mind to it, I wish you had lived out your natural span. And that kind of stuck with me. So I went in and began a poem. And this is called Birds Dying of Old Age. It's in 4 little sections. The sparrow decided eons ago that when her time came, she'd just give up fighting the fleas and ticks and lie down in the duff and close her eyes and let the little people eat her back to the earth. Just let me get back to Mexico, the turkey vulture is thinking, halfway across the gulf, his shoulder socket grinding with pain. Back to my favorite tree with the cow bones scattered underneath and the beautiful view across the empty chaparral. The storm petrel was traveling solo, riding a northeasterly off Kamchatka when her heart stopped. She crumpled into a feathered clump, and the wind carried her a few miles farther before dropping her into the North Pacific. A male Anna's hummingbird laps up a nightcap from our feeder that returns to his favorite viburnum. As darkness descends, he latches his claws around a familiar twig, falls asleep, and never wakes up. The scarlet feathers of his gorget fade, but for years his desiccated body will remain perched there on the branch. I'm going to get my water bottle. I'm not going to step over the cords. So I don't know about you, but another thing that my wife and I have done to manage our stress in these crazy times is get away from town a little bit. So we garden hard, and we have a kind of high maintenance household, and when we are watching too much politics, sometimes we just have to walk out the door and get a fresh perspective. So this is set in one of our favorite little coastal towns. It's called Etnescoan on President's Day. Dingy green carpet, pink formica countertops, fragrance of mildew and sanitizer. I've always liked this motel. And what better place than a tsunami-doomed beach town at the westernmost edge of the continent on a faux national holiday, a month into this bogus administration's avalanche of lies, to contemplate the erosion of democracy. Pulling on my rain bibs and parka, I slouch out into the mist, nod to the guy in the scuffed yellow hard hat, bucking up a big Sitka spruce that blew over in last night's gale. Out on the beach, amid the storm rack, a party of gulls eviscerates a dead seal, pulling out the pink and blue entrails like pundits dissecting a gut-wrenching election. With the drizzle thickening to rain, I trundle on, wondering what on earth can be done. Vote, march, send money, undo the years of gerrymandering, write poems, spit in the ocean. At the water's edge, a tall, shaggy man is shooting video of his young daughter. In blue fleece, pink tights, and yellow boots, she splashes into the shallows, dragging a 3-foot-long bull kelp toward the waves. No one can say where our country is headed. The little girl doesn't know how it works, but I'm going to adopt her brave, innocent attitude. "Dad," she yells, "I'm putting it back." And she flings the slippery plant into the surf. Well, let's put it back. Let's put it all back. So I'm going to read you a few work poems now. As I said, I grew up in the Midwest, moved to Portland after college, 1974. I used my creative writing skills to falsify a resume and got a job as a maintenance man at Marylhurst Convent. So that was my first gardening job. The nuns didn't have a clue, so it was a great place to learn. I barely had a clue myself, but I worked hard. I was eager to learn. And at that time, there were about 100 nuns at Marylhurst. Beautiful grounds, if you were there back in the day. And that was fine. It was my domain. I took care of all the grounds. Dug graves, took some cows, Christmas tree plantation, rose beds, vegetable garden, flowers for the altar. It's paradise. There were 6 men who took care of the whole facility, carpenter, electrician, laundryman, car guy, and me, the groundskeeper. So this is a poem that I wrote at the time, kind of trying to describe some of the oddness of that setup. 6 guys taking care of 100 nuns and what they might have thought about us. It's called Convent Maintenance Shop. What does she make of us, this novice they've sent with the week's fix-it requests? Cowering in the doorway to our low-ceilinged shop in the convent's basement, she watches Wilbur at the long bench doing autopsies on TV sets. Beyond him, stooped over the ancient vice, senile Ned is unbending used nails. Our huge table saw must seem to her like some terrible altar in the center of the gloom, its carbide teeth gleaming. Muttered curses come from the desk where Bill the X, executive officer, ex-Marine, ex-con, etc., he dubs himself, smokes over months of work orders. She's seen him before, upstairs, emerging from the elevator, booming, "Men on the floor," tools dangling from his belt like scalps. Sparks leaped when he changed her narrow room's bare light bulb to double fluorescent tubes. He didn't bother to throw the breaker, he told us later, to see if she'd jump. Now she slips her messages onto the jaws of Ned's vice, makes a sign at her breast as if tying a knot, her lips trembling with shame or fear, and retreats upstairs, fervently hoping that she and her sisters may hereafter devote themselves, heart and soul, to prayer, uncompromised by maintenance and repair. It's a little poem, a little prose poem from my second book, Going to Seed, that was also set at the convent. Just an odd scene there at the convent that I stumbled onto. It's called Under the Ivy. Once at the convent, whipping leaves into the wooded ravine, I dropped my rake down the steep, ivy-covered slope. When I went to retrieve it, my boot struck something under the ivy. I cut away some vines and found terracotta pots, the crumbling remains of a wrought iron bench, and a foot-high ceramic statue of the Virgin. This must be the place Sister Josephine told me about. In the early years of the Cold War, the convent got 100 new novices a year. Many were just off the farm, and they wanted a bit of garden to ease their loneliness and fear. The Mother Superior told them to pray to Jesus, but she also gave them this shady, good-for-nothing woods to potter in. They cleared out the ivy, terraced the slopes, and transformed 100 yards of ravine into a garden. They lugged in boulders to make the little creek jump and sing. Summer evenings, they held vespers down there. I found their brick fire pit overgrown with ferns. Think of it, 100 young women in black wimples gardening in the ravine. One more convent poem. I also mentioned that they had a lot of pastures back in the day. There was a lot of open space out by the road, and they had beef cattle just to manage the pastures, and it was also my responsibility to take care of the cattle. So this is a poem from that experience called Evening Star. Fork down hay for the white-faced steers. Sit in the haymow door, watching the horses graze, chewing myself a dry clover sprig. Long day over, no evening plans. Dust motes drift on the ambering light. Pigeons flap and coo in the rafters. First star now, low in the east. Sweat cools and crusts on my face. Muscles lean back on their bones. And all thoughts heel down to a low whistling. Peaceful hanging out with cows that don't know they're on the way to slaughter. So this is a poem that tries to capture a little bit of my ambivalence about the city. I love Portland, but I'm a small town guy. And this will tell you a little bit about how I related to Portland in those years. It's called To Portland. When I lived there, I was always seeking out wild places, scavenging miner's lettuce behind the Barber Boulevard Fred Meyer, hunting chanterelles by the Sacagawea statue in Washington Park. I used to net minnows in Oaks Bottom, that little swamp behind the amusement park. Herons would kite over from Hardtack Island, and crows squabble over the corpses of frogs stoned by the neighborhood boys. One year, I snuck seeds of broomcorn and burdock into the pansy planters at Pioneer Square. Once, from a poison oak thicket near Merrillhurst, I chased a red fox into the river. And once, on Selvey Island, I caught a 3-pound catfish that looked remarkably like the mayor, Bud Clark. The snapshots in my wallet those years were of mushrooms. Trespassing was my favorite sport, and the city's vaunted amenities, live music, ethnic restaurants, a movie for every moment of your life, meant little to me, were in fact irritants, excess pleasures I didn't have time for. So I left and settled at the edge of this small town where I've been tending flowers for 20 years. I know Portland now as a vast repository for books. My visits are mostly brief raids on the Treasury. I hope that pockets of forest still harbor young pagans, that kestrels forever harry the pigeons in the park blocks, that Amanita muscaria still burst through the bark dust around Pittock Mansion. But I'm not in touch with the city's undergrowth anymore. So I'll just leave this poem on the Portlandia shelf at Powell's Books, a damp salute from an outlander to those who hunt crawdads, where a clay creek gushes from its pipe and flows freely into the Willamette. So I left, and I moved to Corvallis to go to school. I was going to be a science teacher, but that didn't work out, so I reverted to my interest in being a professional gardener. And I got a job taking care of the grounds of the historic courthouse in Corvallis in its heyday. It was a terrific showpiece of the center of the town, and it was a wonderful, wonderful job. They let me do a lot of really elaborate floral displays, surrounded by subsidized apartment buildings all around. Among them, many people who like to watch me and offer advice. So this is a poem, kind of a revenge poem for one particularly persistent person offering advice. It's called A Lecture on Aphids. She plucks my sleeve. "Young man," she says, "you need to spray. You have aphids on your roses." In a dark serge coat and a pillbox hat. By God, it's my third grade Sunday school teacher. Shrunken but still stern, the town's most successful corporate attorney's mother. She doesn't remember me. I holster my secateurs, smile publicly, and reply, "Ma'am, did you know a female aphid is born carrying fertile eggs? Come, look, there may be 5 or 6 generations, cheek by jowl, on this peace bud. Don't they remind you of refugees crowding the deck of a tramp steamer? Look through my hand lens. They're translucent. You can see their dark innards like kidneys in aspic. Yes, ma'am, they are full-time inebriates and unashamed of their nakedness. But isn't there something wild and uplifting about their complete indifference to the human prospect? And then I do something wicked. "Ma'am," I say, "I love aphids." And I squeeze a few dozen from the nearest bud and eat them. After the old woman scuttles away, I feel ill and sit down to consider what comes next. You see, aphids aren't sweet, as I had always imagined. Even though rose wine is their only food, aphids are bitter. I have 3 more poems. So my wife Cup and I garden hard on our property in South Corvallis, and this is an autumn poem, although it's called Summer Blood. It's actually set in autumn. Summer Blood. I've cored and sliced and sauteed summer in the giant pot, and now chop the flesh of tomatoes into bloody chunks, a heathen priest practicing vegetable sacrifice. I turn the heat down low and let the troubles I can't do anything about simmer all afternoon. Outside, autumn clouds thicken into rain. The sauce thickens and the bubbles erupt more slowly. If floods come, if friends sicken or die, if another war erupts, there will be quart jars full of the blood of summer to feed and console whoever may come to open the dark cupboard. So we grow a lot of our own vegetables and put a lot up and share with our neighbors and friends. But there comes a time when you're just sick of garden. And what you really want is a good hard frost. This is called black tomato. Even before I'm fully awake, my skin registers how cold the house is. Cold moonlight seeps in around the closed curtains. The cold world's little sounds are frost muffled too. The ticking of lumber shrinking in the walls, scritch of bamboo against the windows, thud of a car door down the street. I am coldly pleased. Autumn has limped on too long. The garden sputtering out tasteless tomatoes, bitter bell peppers, tough-skinned crooknecks. Weary of harvest, fed up with stoop labor, I still feel duty-bound to eat everything. Cracked radishes, beetle-bitten green beans, the final slug-riddled cabbage. I want the whole garden executed. I bundle up and go outside. The garden is flocked. Every surface of leaf and stem is furred white with a fine woven, tightly fitted shroud. I snap a frozen tomato from the vine. As it thaws in my hand, I squeeze it to mush. End of the season. Can't wait. Final poem. Thank you all so very, very much for having me. This is what the hardworking gardener does in retirement. This is called Hardware Serenity. You wouldn't call sorting nails meditation exactly, just a tedious manual task. Tossing vinyl-coated sinkers into an old bugler tin, 6-penny finish nails into a plastic yogurt container. I find it oddly peaceful. Early autumn, Mariners game on the radio, light rain on the metal roof, 70 years old, time to get organized. Roofing nails, ring shank nails, staples and brads, order and decay. I'll put off sorting screws for another day. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Charles. And let's see if anyone has questions.
Yes, Tom mentioned there might be a Q&A.
Q&A.
Yeah, and if you don't have any for me, I certainly have some for you, so you might want to step up.
Well, I have one, which is, you've written a variety of things. Who are you reading? And who would you say influences you, or has influenced you?
Yeah, I read widely, and I read whatever I feel like writing. I read those people who inspire me. That I just finished a novel. I just got a contract for the novel. It's going to be published about a year from now. So I've been and I've been teaching myself how to do that. So I read a lot of novels in the vein of Wendell Berry, Barbara Kingsolver. It's a novel about young farmers trying to protect their land from development. So And there are so many great novelists working these days. It just goes on and on. Can't to keep up. But I take my icons and put their books on the shelf above me. And whenever I get stuck, I look up there. It helps me. You know, they're with me. So I feel like that. I think we're, you know, all writers are working on the same project, trying to save the world, really, you know, create culture, create some kind of sense of love and humanity. So that helps me. Poetry, when I came to Oregon, I came to Oregon because of Gary Snyder, Kenneth Rexroth, Mary Oliver, and Theodore Recchi. Those are the people I had discovered late in my college life. And when I had an opportunity to move west, I loved Ohio. Ohio is great, but there's no mountains, there's no ocean. And when I arrived in Portland, I was kind of blown away. I arrived I had worked at that one summer in Alaska. After I got out of college, I took hitchhiked and took a bus down the Alcan, arrived in Portland on the day they celebrated the closing of Harbor Drive, and we're going to turn it into Riverfront Park, Tom McCall Riverfront Park, and they were having a big celebration. There was 10,000 people on the riverfront, on the roadway, and we're going to tear this sucker up and make a park. And I go, wow, that's all right. So I became a Portlander on the spot and Oregonian ever since. So those, you know, the people who were writing about nature were always my primary guides in whatever genre. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the novel. Contract.
Thrilled. Really quite excited. Thanks.
I do like to get away and decompress from all the stress that life consumes you of, and so I can relate really well with nature poems, and I just recently got into birding, so I appreciate you hearing that tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Birding in particular has just exploded because of COVID. You know, I mean, people are looking for things to do close, I think, you know, in part, and because of the sense of their fragile nature, and they're with us, they're a friend. I got share some beautiful news. I mentioned Robin Wall Kimmerer, and I got some nods from you today. We just heard today that Robin Wall Kimmerer won a MacArthur grant, as did one of the premier birders and writers in the country, a black man named J. Drew Lanham, who is has just been a terrific, he's a great writer. And J. Drew, D-R-E-W, Lanham, L-A-N-H-A-M. First thing I got encountered him was about maybe almost going on 10 years ago. He had a piece in Orion magazine called 9 Rules for the Black Birder. And this is just about the time that the black birder in Central Park was being harassed by the lady, and it really blew up. You know, the first rule for black birders: don't wear a hoodie. You know, and it's like this bitter kind of real advice with a undercut of you know, protest to it. And he's a really spectacular ornithologist and a really good writer. So justice, right, to wonderful people that are representing different perspectives are going to get MacArthur grants.
How long have you been writing poetry?
I started in college in 1972-3. I started, I was in college as a math and physics major, and I was kind of I was good at math, you know, but I came out as a philosophy and literature major, you know, Vietnam War, marijuana. I was just like, wow, math, physics, you know. And part of that was a literature class I took, in which I had a really good professor who, you know, when he taught T.S. Eliot, The Wasteland, I was just like, oh my God, really? You can do that kind of stuff with language? I don't understand any of it, but wow, you know. And I write, in case you didn't notice, I write nothing like T.S. Eliot. I don't like T.S. Eliot. I don't like what T.S. Eliot represents. But just, you know, when I see people who are, you know, exemplary craftspeople, that blew me away. So I started writing really bad poetry in college. I didn't publish my first book until I was 50 years old, and I took seriously my desire to learn the craft and to have something to say. So that's the answer to it. Thanks. Long time. All good.
I don't know if it makes any difference, but when I read your book, I liked all the poems, but I was startled by the poem about the death of the birds. I was just stunned by that poem.
Oh, thank you, Bill.
It's, not sure it means anything to me, but it was, I have never forgotten that poem.
Well, that's beautiful. People have pointed out to me, I didn't really notice it myself, but it's pretty much the only one that's not a first-person narrative. It's, it's kind of a documentary, imaginative documentary poem, so that has something to do with it. Also, it's just kind of, it's tender, right? It's like, right? They should, that we promulgate a holocaust on birds. Billions die on our cars, windows, and cats primarily. And so, yeah. Y'all good? Will?
I just wanted to say, I really love how you introduce the poems and tell the stories before you speak the poem. This is, because then you get the story of this beautiful distillation of it also. And I love your thing about recognizing beauty and experiencing joy, which I think is really good medicine for these times. So thank you.
Thank you, Will.
Do you have a poem you would like to end with? Is there one more poem?
You told me to think about that. You did. Well, we should leave on an upbeat, right? So there's a bunch of poems in here about and for trees. So this is one in particular, one of my favorite trees in Corvallis. It's a Douglas fir tree. Easy tree to be kind of ho-hum about. But, they're magnificent trees. They've been brutalized by the lumber industry into, monocultural stuff, but they're, magnificent trees. This one stands by itself. It helps when they get the chance to spread out in front of a building on the OSU campus. At some point way back in the day, somebody strung a cord or a wire or something all the way around it and kind of choked it. So it's got to hang. It looks like it's right on its neck, so it's looked like it's been hung. But I can feel the aura of this tree from half a block away. I can just sense that I'm coming into the presence of the tree, and likely its roots are out that far. We're already into it. So I love this tree. So this is a poem for that tree. It's called Shine. After a month of rain, we're all a little depressed, light deprived, and mush-brained. Except for that snaggle-toothed old conifer that stands alone beside Fairbanks Hall. It's in fine fettle, flexing its muscles in the wind, green hair glistening with rain. A squall from the west is like having old friends knock at your door, fiddle, banjo, and hooch in hand. Lucky the creature for whom rain is moonshine. There'll be a hot time in the downpour tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. That was wonderful. Thank you all for being here and experiencing this tonight. Great to see you. As I said earlier, Teal Ansari is going to be here in November on the second Wednesday of the month. So if you haven't signed up on our sign-up sheet, please do that.
Thank you for being here. I'm Tom Hogan. Good night. Thank you.